Okay, so what are the coverage of purposive communication lesson 1? So we have actually 5 topics that we will be tackling today, which are, we have your what is communication, the communication process, the principles of communication, communication ethics, and the last one will be your communication and globalization. Okay, so let's proceed to our first topic. So what is communication? So by definition now, when we say communication, it came actually from the Latin word communicare, which means to share. So from the Latin word itself, you can say already that the word communication's main purpose now is to share informations, to convey now different meanings, and at the same time, it is now a way to transfer now one idea from one person or group to another person or group. Okay, another definition of your communication is this. It is the act of conveying meaning to a person or group using mutually understood symbols, gestures, behaviors, and semiotic rules. Okay, so take note of the word mutually. So in order to have communication, both parties needs to have a mutual understanding of the language or the symbols or gestures or behaviors that they are using to communicate. So communication will not happen if there is no mutual understanding. Okay, so for example, in speaking, if one is speaking in English and the other one is speaking in French, for example, and both does not understand the same language, communication will not happen. Okay, because there's already a barrier that stops them from understanding each other's language. So for you to convey now informations, you need to have a mutual understanding of the language that you are using. It also plays a significant role in a day-to-day basis. It is used now to persuade, to inform, entertain, and motivate. So in our course, communication now is mainly used now for persuasion, to give information, to entertain, and to motivate. So considering now communication as part of our day-to-day basis, it is now used, okay, on a daily basis, or it is used now every day to to give now information or to create now messages to other people. Okay, so for you to provide now your feelings or emotions or whatever needs that you have, we use now communication on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so we go now to our second one, which is your communication process. So how does communication happen? So for the communication process, the goal of communication is to transmit information and understanding, the information from one person or group to another person or group. So take note that communication will only take place if the transmitted information that you have given now as the sender is understood. Okay? If they were able to understand now the information that you have transmitted or that you have given, therefore, you were able to have communication. If there is no understanding in the communication process, therefore, there is now an error or the communication process now have failed. Okay, so again, for communication to happen, the transmitted information needs to be understood. Okay, so for if once the transmitted information was understood, automatically there is communication. Okay, so there are actually three. Okay, so three basic components of your communication process. So these are the important components that makes up your communication process. We have your sender, we have your channel, and we also have your receiver. So what is the sender now? A sender is the one responsible in sending now or providing the message. Okay, the sender creates the ideas, The sender now is the one that initiates now the communication or initiates now the message that needed to be transferred. What is now the receiver? The receiver is the one that receives your ideas. The receiver is the one responsible in understanding and interpreting now your message that was sent by the sender. And your channel actually is now the way now on how you have transmitted your message. So yung channel, ito yung way mo, okay, in how you were able to send the message to the receiver. So for example, did you send it through verbal or through speaking? Did you send it through sign languages? Did you send it through a form of symbols, through a form of a written text? Those are your channels, okay? The channel is the one responsible now in ensuring that the receiver now receives your message. So again, these are your three basic components. So if one is missing, automatically our complete communication process will not function. So if, for example, you don't have a receiver, nawawala si receiver, so walang magre-receive ng message mo, automatically, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng communication. Pag wala rin naman si sender, wala ring marireceive yung receiver mo na any form of message that you want to communicate. Okay? If you don't have your channel, if you don't have any means now to communicate to your receiver, automatically your receiver now or your sender will not be able to send messages or to communicate with one another. So again, our three basic components are your sender, your channel, and your receiver. Okay? Do you have any question, Miss Christine? Okay. So let's go now to our communication process. So this diagram now will now explain to you the entire process of communication. So we have your sender, we have your messages, transmission, we have your recipient, receiver, and your feedback. So how does communication now happen when we follow this communication process? Okay? So again, yung sender, siya yung nagbibigay ng idea. Okay? Siya yung mag-iisip nung sasabihin niya. He or she will be the one to provide now whatever information or whatever message he or she wants to convey to the receiver. Then after now creating the idea, you will now have the product, which is your message. Okay, so once you thought now of the idea, so for example, you were thinking of a certain topic, and after thinking of a certain topic, you were able to create now the message out of that topic. Okay, so after you created now your message, automatically, you will proceed to your transmission or your channel or your signal. Okay, yung transmission, siya na yung bahalang mag-send now, or your way of transmitting or your signal, siya na yung bahalang mag-send ng message mo through the recipient. Okay, yung recipient, siya yung magde-decode. Take note that your recipient and your receiver are totally different. Okay, yung recipient is, for example, you use now a mobile phone in creating your message. So using your mobile phone, it was transmitted now and was received through another mobile phone. Okay, so your messages, your transmission, and your recipients are all part of your channels. Channels lahat yan. Before it goes to your receiver. So once now the recipient was able to receive now the message and decode it, the receiver now is the one responsible to identify the meaning, to understand the meaning, or to make sure, to check now whether he or she now with the sender have the same understanding. So for example, the sender sent a message saying, "How are you?" Okay, so it was encoded, then it was sent, then it was received and decoded. Then the receiver now received the message saying good morning. How are you? Sorry. In that receiver must now understand the meaning of the word how are you. Okay, if for example, the receiver did not understand the meaning of how are you, wala tayong feedback. Okay? Feedback is very important when it comes to communication. If you do not provide feedback from your, okay, once you receive now a certain message or a certain information, there will now be a misunderstanding. Either the sender will think that you did not understand now the information that he or she have provided, or that you did not receive the information. Okay, so for example, you said, how are you? The receiver said, I'm fine, thank you. That's your feedback. So once you created now the feedback, that means that the communication process was successful. Take note that in communication, it will never go one way. It always has now a two-way process wherein you need to have always a sender and a receiver, and that receiver needs to always provide feedback for the communication process to be successful. Okay? So ang feedback process natin, tinatawag natin siyang feedback cycle. The feedback cycle is when a person receives a message and he or she responds to it by giving a reply. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. So once, for example, the receiver is able to understand now the information provided by the sender, automatically, you need to provide now what we call a response or a reply. Pag nag-provide ka ng reply, you provided now a response, the sender now will identify if you were able to understand the information that was provided. Take note that not all feedbacks provides now provides a complete communication process. So for example, I said, how are you? Ang sagot mo, I'm hungry. Automatically, there's no understanding in the communication. So if you are asked, how are you? Automatically, ang normal response natin doon ay, I'm fine, thank you, I'm not okay, I'm doing okay, I'm not doing okay. Those are the common response that we will hear when you ask now a certain person, how are they? So if, for example, the recipient now provided a different feedback or a different response that is not related to your message, there is now no understanding between the sender and the receiver. Okay? For a communication process to be fully successful, besides from providing feedback, there needs to be understanding. As I've said a while ago, when we talk about communication, there needs to be a mutual understanding. Okay, so pag wala tayong mutual understanding, as I've said, automatically, the communication process is a failure. Okay, so pag nag-provide ka ng feedback, it should always be based now on your sender's information or the idea that he or she created. Okay, so how do we do now a perfect feedback cycle? Okay, so as you can see here, we have now we have two people. We have the sender. The sender sends a message and the receiver receives the message. So once now a sender, the first phase of your feedback cycle, once a sender now sends a message and the receiver now receives a message, the person now receiving the message is the one responsible in understanding and interpreting the message. So again, pag sinabi mo dito, how are you? The receiver now receives it and interprets and understands the question. So automatically, during the feedback cycle, the previous receiver will become your sender. Okay? Now, he or she now will provide now a feedback depending on how he or she understood or interpreted the message. So the sender now sends a feedback, and the previous sender will become your receiver. So the receiver now will be responsible. Okay, the receiver of the feedback will be the one responsible in understanding and interpreting the feedback. If, okay, from the feedback now, you will be able to identify if the person now that you are talking to were able now to understand and interpret the message. So for example, he or she responded, "I'm okay." That shows now that the feedback is correct. Okay, it is in line with the message that you have provided. So if you ask here, for example, "Have you eaten?" The message that you have provided is "Have you eaten?" And the feedback that was provided is yes or no. Yes, I've eaten. No, I have not yet eaten. It shows now that the message and the feedback have both the same understanding. But when a message now, for example, says, "Did you do your course today?" And your feedback now is, "I'm too lazy." Okay? So there is already a vague response when it comes to the feedback. So automatically, there is now an error in the communication process. Okay? Kailangan every time na nagpo-provide tayo ng feedback, it should always relate to the message. It should be understood now that the message that you have sent and the feedback that you have been, that feedback that you will receive is in line with the message. Okay? So ito yung ating feedback cycle. So sa feedback cycle natin makikita if there is an understanding between the sender and the receiver. So pag hindi, for example, nakasagot si sender, ay si receiver, there are a lot of factors affecting that one. Take note, hindi lang dahil sa understanding or interpreting ang nagiging issue natin when it comes to communication. We also have other factors affecting those kinds of things. What are these? For example, noise. Ayun, noise. Background noise. So for example, if there is now a certain amount of noise found now in your communication process, there's a possibility that the receiver will not receive the information or the message correctly. Okay? And at the same time, we also have, for example, attention. So for example, the receiver is distracted and is doing other things. So there is a tendency that he or she might ask again what the message is or what the question is. That is also now another factor affecting now your communication process. And one common factor now is your language barrier. Okay, so for example, you are talking to someone who doesn't know to speak the language, automatically the receiver will not be able to understand or interpret the message. Okay, so that is your feedback cycle. May question ka, Miss Christine? Are you okay, Miss Christine? Sige, I'll proceed now to the next one. Okay, so let's proceed to our third principle, which third topic, which are the principles of communication. So we have a lot of principles in terms of communication, okay, which we now usually use to ensure that there is a complete communication process or the communication itself is successful. Okay, so what are these principles? We have the very first one, which is the principle of clarity. So ano nga ba ang principle of clarity? So by definition, the principle of clarity is the thought or idea that needs to be communicated should be spelled properly. The words should be arranged in such a way that the receiver understands the same work which the sender conveys. Pronunciation should be clear as possible, including the enunciation to avoid misconception. So ano nga ba ang principle of clarity? Okay, so pag sinabi nating principle of clarity, these are the important things that we need to remember. The spelling, okay, the arrangement, the pronunciation, and the enunciation. So these are the important things found in your principle of clarity. Spelling. Okay, take note that spelling is very important in terms of communication, especially if you're dealing with people that are not actually native speakers or are having difficulty understanding now the language. If you provide now correct spelling words, in asking now information or providing information, it can help now in the clarity of your communication. Okay, at the same time, arrangement. So, baka instead of saying, how you are, ang sasabihin natin, which is automatically, hindi na siya clarified. So, vague na siya for the receiver because the arrangement of the words are not actually arranged properly. And we also have pronunciation. So when it comes to the pronunciation and enunciation, this is actually when you are dealing with people who actually speaks the language natively. Okay, so for us, for example, we are not native language of English. So automatically, we have some words that we pronounce or enunciate differently. Okay, which is actually which is understandable, which is okay, but for native speakers, it is difficult when it comes to clarity. Okay, sometimes when you pronounce words or you enunciate words to native speakers, they have a tendency to correct you or to ask you again what you are saying. So that is a normal process when it comes to communication. It just shows that the principle of clarity is present. Okay, so they are actually asking you again the second time or asking you to repeat the same word to clarify whether what you're saying is actually the same thing with what they are thinking. Okay, so yun ang ating principle of clarity. So again, ang ating principle of clarity, the important things that we need to remember are the spelling, the arrangement, the pronunciation, and enunciation. Para we'll avoid now misconceptions or we'll avoid misunderstanding in terms of communication. Okay, the same we can also add here the use of your punctuation marks. So take note, punctuation marks are very important. Okay, it plays a very important role when you're creating a message. Okay, when you accidentally now change a period to a question mark, automatically it creates misconception. So for example, the word I'm okay. When you use the word I'm okay with the period and I'm okay with the question mark, those are two different words with different meanings. Okay, when you say I'm okay with the period, you are now saying that you are for sure, accurately, 100% sure that you are okay. So when you say I'm okay with the question mark, with the misconception of the question mark, the receiver now might say that your answer is questionable. Okay, you might be saying that you're not sure or you don't know or you're not really aware of your feelings. Okay, so those are what we call your misconceptions. Next, we have now your principle of attention. So pag sa attention, as I've mentioned a while ago, this is a very important now factor in receiving your message. So once a receiver does not have full attention, automatically it affects the communication process because it says here that attention is very important in communication. Okay? So one should pay attention to every single detail in communicating to understand that what the sender means. The receiver should be drawn towards the message by paying attention to the emotion, behavior, manner, gestures, so they may respond properly to the message. Okay? So when it comes to the principle of attention, the sender and the sender is also very important. Okay? Again, so when it comes now to your principle of attention, the sender also needs to ensure that he or she is not giving mixed signals. Okay? Kasi yung receiver natin will not only focus to what you are saying, it will also focus on your emotion, your behavior, your manner, and the gestures you are doing when you are creating the message. So for example, the sender now is saying something to the receiver, but the manner now of how she is or he is saying it is different from what she is saying. So for example, you're saying to your friends or to your family members that you are tired. Diba? Nakakapagod. So for example, I'm tired. Pero yung I'm tired mo, galit. Okay, so you said it in a mad way, or you were angry, your behavior that you were saying, the time that you were saying it was you were angry, but the intention that you are trying to convey is not in an angry manner. So for example, you just want them to understand that you are feeling tired, but then the way you said it, or the manner you said it, the manner now on how you said it, or the behavior that you have shown during that time, okay, created now a misconception that receives now by the receiver. Okay, so for example, sinabi mo siya in an angry manner, pero ang gusto mo lang talaga is to inform. But the receiver understood it now differently. Automatically, there's already an error in the communication. There's a misunderstanding, or there's now what you call misconception. Okay, this is very, very common in terms of communication. Okay, this is the very principle that causes many people to miscommunicate, because sometimes the action that is being shown by the sender is different now from what he or she is saying, and the receiver now understands more, okay, the action rather than the message that you are sending. Okay? So yun yung principle of attention. So to avoid now these kinds of misunderstanding, we also need to make sure that the sender does not send mixed signals. So what if, for example, your sender is sending you mixed signals? What can you do as the receiver? Okay, what can you do as a receiver is to ask the same thing again, or to clarify now if your understanding is the same with the understanding of your sender. Okay, so pag attention din, we need to make sure that your full attention is also there when you are communicating. So while communicating with someone, you are busy watching. So you're watching your favorite show and someone is talking to you. The tendency is that you will be more motivated to watch now something instead of listening to the conversation or to the communication. So the tendency, since you are distracted and your attention is not in full, you will ask now again the speaker or the sender to send you again the message. Okay? So those are your principle of attention. So pag sa principle of attention, ang ating important words doon is your, okay, you need to be drawn towards. Okay, you need to pay attention to emotion, behavior, manner, and gesture. Yes, Christine, do you have question?
None, ma'am.
Okay. Do you need to go to the toilet?
No po.
Okay. Just tell me if you need like a break. I can give you a break. Okay?
Okay po.
Okay. So next, dito na tayo sa principle of feedback. We're almost done. So sa principle of feedback, so as I've said a while ago, feedback is very important because that's the only way for the sender to know whether you really understood the message or the information that she or he has given. Okay, so the feedback signifies that the communication is effective. Therefore, it is important to provide feedback once communication takes place. Okay, so provide a simple response or a simple reply on the message now provided by the sender, but we need to ensure that the feedback also matches now or understands now the message that was given by the sender. Okay, so as I've said a while ago, pag sinanong ka, if are you okay at ang sagot mo I'm hungry, automatically walang communication, understanding. So pag tinanong ka I'm hungry, are you hungry? Then you said yes, I did not eat my lunch. That means that the communication is effective because there's an understanding in the communication. That is your principle of feedback. Okay? So next we have your principle of informality. Take note that in terms of communication, we always have what we call your formal communication and informal communication. So when we talk about formal communication, these are the types of communication that we usually use for formal functions. Like for example, when you're talking to someone who is superior, when you are, for example, presenting, when you are discussing, these are your formal languages. Okay, but when we talk about informal languages, these are your usual languages that you use depending now on how intimate you are with the one you are conversing. So usually pag mas intimate sa atin yung kausap natin, we have our own types of informal language. So when we talk to our friends, to our brothers and sisters, to our families, we have a different types of languages when it comes to these different kinds of people. But normally, we talk informally with our friends, with our siblings, but we talk formally sometimes or most of the times with our parents to show respect at the same time. Okay? So in the principle of informality, okay, when it comes to your communication process, it shows sometimes in communication when you are forced to talk formally, there are some instances that you are not able to provide now the correct information or the correct message that you want because you're having a hard time speaking formally. So sometimes we tend to mix now both formal and informal, like what I'm doing right now when I speak now in Filipino or in Tagalog. So we mix now both formal and informal to create now a rapport, or at the same time for your receiver to deeply now understand what you are talking about. Okay? But take note, the use of both formal and informal may be accepted in some cases, but in some instances it will not be. Okay, so if, for example, you're at work and you're talking to your superiors, okay, for regarding an important matter, we need to talk formally. So if you talk informal, they might now have a misconception that you are being rude or that you are not, you don't know your position in the company. So we need to always ensure that whether we need to identify the situation first before we actually speak either informal or formal. Okay. But in terms of communication, if you want to, okay, to create now a message that is effective and is efficient, if both formal and informal is accepted, then you can do so. Okay. Because at the same time, it creates now better conveying of message if you are able to transfer now the message correctly, or if you are able now to produce the desired result that you want. Okay? So pag for example, the desired result you want, for example, is that you want the audience or you want the receiver to cry, okay? And you are not able to do it because of the formality that you have used, automatically you were not able to get the desired result that you have. So kung writer ka, for example, and you are writing a book and you want the readers to feel now a certain emotion, or you want them, for example, to cry on a specific scene, and you were not able to do it because of the language that you have used, automatically your result is not good, or the desired result was not met. But if, for example, you use now certain languages, which includes a mixture of both informal and formal to get the desired result, that is also applicable. Because take note, it is valid to convey message informally as it is as important as your formal communication. So hindi porket informal siya, hindi na siya important. Okay, so both goes ways. So whether it's formal or informally, both type of communication is important. Okay? Next, we have your principle of consistency. So pag sinabi nating consistency from the beginning until the end, whatever method you were using, whatever way of speaking you were using, it should go all throughout now the communication to show consistency. Okay, so consistency always matters in communication. To achieve consistent result, one must be consistent in the way they communicate. It contributes to the reputation of both sender and receiver and strengthens their relationship. Okay, so for example, you are talking to your friend in a calm manner. You started now in a calm manner. You also need to end the conversation in a calm manner. Okay? Yun yung consistency. So for example, you were talking with someone and it ended up into an argument, that is not consistency. So in terms of communication, how you started the communication, that is also the way it should end. So if you are also talking formally from the beginning, you also end formally. If you are talking informally, you can also end informally. Hindi yung nag-start ka ng formal, then you became informal, then you started formal again, then informal. Those are inconsistent. What happens now if you have inconsistency is that there will be a problem now or misconceptions in terms of your relationship with the receiver. Okay? So the same when, for example, you are talking to your parents or to someone who's elder than you, and you, for example, started calmly talking to them, then it went to anger, then it went to being calm again, then it went again to anger, automatically there will now be a misconception with your relationship. Okay, you will have now a problem when it comes to your relationship because the way you are talking or communicating with one another is not consistent. But do take note, okay, that consistency also goes hand in hand with your principle of timeliness. Okay? So dito papasok yung there's always a right time for everything. Okay, whether you give now information, you give now a message, or you want to convey something to someone, it is important that the receiver is ready to accept or hear the message. Okay, doon papasok yung consistency din natin. So for example, you know already that the time is not good because, for example, the receiver is agitated, he or she is, for example, he's getting depressed, is getting anxiety because of all these things that are happening, and you as a sender added now, for example, you gave another negative information, another negative comment, automatically it will affect now the communication process because that person already undergoing now these certain kinds of stress. Automatically he or she does not want to receive another stress. So that is your principle of timeliness. You need to make sure that the receiver is ready now to accept, to receive whatever information you are giving. Pag hindi siya ready, do not provide any information or any message that could affect now the consistency of your communication. Okay, so the principle states that communication should be done at an accurate time as possible. So the word accurate there pertains to the right time to provide now the information to the receiver. Okay? So pag right time, there's also a right place. So part pa rin yun ng timeliness. Okay, whatever communication you are saying to another person or to whoever is receiving it, it should be at the right time and at the right place for you to be able to convey the message or the information properly. Okay, to attain this principle, the sender who conveys the message should make safety measures when delivering the message. Okay, so I think as human beings, we should know, okay, whether that person is ready now to accept informations or to hear something from you, or is he or she ready to talk to you. Okay, yung safety measures dito, ito lang yung what we are talking about here is to check whether that person is ready or not. Okay, so for example, you can ask them, I need to provide you with these kinds of information. It may be harmful or it may be negative towards you. Do you want to listen to it? If they say no, then stop there already. Okay, but if they say yes, they want to hear it, then that's the time we provide the message or the information. Okay, so those are your safety measures. Just simply asking if they are ready to receive the information or no. Okay, time is very important. When the receiver is not ready to accept or hear the message, it is not the right time to convey the message. Okay, so if you're going to ask when is the right time, okay, only the receiver can answer that question. Okay, it's not the sender, it's the receiver. Okay, so you need to ask when is the right time now for that person to receive a message. So even in school, okay, when you're going to ask something from your teachers or from your instructor and they tell you, can you not do it? Can we not do it now? Can we do it later because I'm busy doing something? Okay, then you're going to ask when is the right time for me to talk to you. So if the teacher now provides or the instructor provides time or provides now a specific time for you to talk to them, then that's the right time. Okay, the same with other conversations. It's not always the sender. Okay, it is not the sender's decision to create the right time. It is the receiver's decision to create the right time in receiving now the message. Okay. Next, we have your principle of adequacy. Okay, in short, your messages needs to be sufficient. Okay, it needs to be complete. It does not need to be vague. Okay, so this principle is important in communication. Inadequate message creates confusion to the receiver, but an adequate message builds rapport to both parties. So it is important to deliver adequate message at all times in all aspects. So for example, you were given a paper and they just simply said fill in. Okay, that is one example of an inadequate message. Okay, for someone, for example, who's first, if it's his or her first time now receiving that kind of paper and you just simply said fill in, he or she might not know what he or she is supposed to do because you did not actually provide the adequate information. You should have, for example, fill in the blanks with your information. If you just simply gave them a blank paper and you said fill in without even providing now the adequate message, automatically it creates confusion and it creates now misconception between again the receiver and the sender. Okay, sometimes this happens, for example, yung magtatanong tayo, matatakot na yung bata na the student to ask again because he or she is not sure whether she is allowed to ask because yes, Christine.
Ano pong pinagkaiba ng clarity sa adequacy po?
Ang clarity will focus on the spelling. Okay, spelling, word formation, pronunciation, and enunciation. Pag adequacy, ito naman is yung pagiging complete nung information. Okay? So pag, for example, nagbigay ka ng information, ang sinabi mo lang fill in or turn off. Ang tatanungin for example nung bata, teacher, ano yung ito-turn off? 'Di ba? But turn off in clarity is a complete statement already. Tama yung word, tama yung sequence ng word, tama yung spelling ng word, pero in the principle of adequacy, it is incomplete. Do you get it?
Thank you po.
Yes. No worry, Miss Kirstine. Okay? So it is important to deliver adequate message at all times in all respects. So nandito pa rin yung word na respect. So every time we are communicating, whoever we are communicating, we need to show a little respect. Okay? So for example, if you're talking to someone your age, siguro dito naman papasok yung informal language, but there's still respect. Okay? But if you're talking to someone who's adult or who's, for example, more superior than you, we use words that are proper now in the conversation. Okay? Next, we go now to your fourth topic, which is your communication ethics. So ano nga bang ethics? So by definition, when we say ethics, it is the moral system or judgment of what is right and wrong, and also refers to the values, conduct, manners, and behavior, the respect of rightness and wrongness of action. So, in short, pag sinabi nating ethics, it is now your ability to identify what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so anong relationship niya naman when it comes to communication? So, communication ethics has to do with the rightness and the wrongness, as well as the appropriateness relevant to the dimension of communication. It advocates truthfulness, accuracy, honesty, and endorse freedom of expression. Okay, so sa communication ethics, this actually focuses now on the manner on how you speak. Okay, whether you are speaking on the right manner and the wrongness. Okay, pero at the same time, this also talks about now whether the information that you are providing is true or false. Okay, so when we talk about communication ethics, we need to ensure now that whatever information we are providing or whatever message we are providing to another person or a group, it needs to be truthful, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be honest, and at the same time endorse freedom of expression. Take note yung freedom of expression. Okay, nowadays, a lot of people are using the word freedom of expression, which is okay. Okay, but if what you're saying is not truth, it's not accurate, and it's not honest, okay, dun tayo magkakaproblema when it comes to your freedom of expression, especially if what you're saying, okay, may affect now the reputation of another person. This is part of your communication ethics. So for example, may kaaway ka, and you started now posting informations in the social media or sending to your friends informations about that person that are not true and accurate. Okay, that will now fall in our communication ethics that the information you are providing is wrong or false. Okay, so we can also use freedom of expression to provide now knowledges about history, about certain matters, about certain objects or certain issues. Okay, and we've provided the truth, we've provided now accuracy, we've provided honesty. Therefore, our communication ethic is right or true. Okay? So pag sa communication ethics, ang nagfo-focus lang talaga dito is whether the information you are providing is correct or wrong. Okay? Yun yung ating communication ethics. It has nothing to do with what you believe in or what you advocate for. It's making sure that whatever information that we are providing or sending to another person, it is true and accurate. Okay? Next, we have now the last one, which is your communication and globalization. Communication and globalization goes hand in hand. Okay, how does this happen? So what is globalization now? It is the process by which people in the world are unified and act as one society. Okay? So sa globalization, there are some issues now that are happening around the world, okay, wherein we are unified because of that certain issues or that certain topics or that certain languages. Nowadays, we are unified actually because of the pandemic, okay? Because not only in our country, but almost around the globe, we have the pandemic. Another form of globalization is the language. Okay, so English is one of the most common languages that we use around the world. So automatically, it can act now as unification all around the globe. So wherever you go, whether now you go to Japan, Korea, Thailand, or any other countries, you can use now English to communicate with other people. English being now a global language. Okay? So English is the language that connects us to globalization. As I've said a while ago, English is our common language in other countries. Okay? It may not be their native language, it may not be our native language, but us knowing English can help us now through globalization, or when we go now to other places, it can help us in communicating or interacting with other people. Next, understanding globalization can help select the most useful communication skills development. Okay? So when it comes to understanding globalization, we need to understand what is first happening around the globe, what is the common thing that is happening around the globe, and from that, we can use it now to develop our communication skills. So for example, what's happening around the world that is common to everyone now is the pandemic. So we can create now a communication that talks about the pandemic. Or for example, we have now vaccinations. So with that certain topic, we can use it now to communicate informations about vaccinations. So that is your understanding of globalization. You need to identify first what main things are being talked about or is common now in almost of all of the countries around the globe. And from that, you create now information that will now be informative to other people. Next, communicating effectively can still be a challenge in the global setting. Take note, as I've said, not everyone knows how to speak English, or not everyone's native language is English. Okay? Even if one person knows how to understand English, that person may not be able to speak the language. Okay, that is one of the challenges. Okay, so when you go to a country now whose native language is different and you're trying to converse to them using the English language, it will not mean now that even English is a global language. It doesn't mean that the one you're talking to knows the language. Okay? So may mga instances na kunwari pupunta tayo sa ibang lugar, we will assume, for example, na they can speak the language because it's a global language, but in all honesty, not everyone knows the language. There are only specific areas, especially if you go now to the province area of that certain country, there are very minimal people who can actually speak the English language. Okay, so do not assume that if you go to other places, they will understand you if you speak English. It doesn't always go that way. That's why it is still a challenge up to now. Okay, with all the other languages emerging, English is not only the main communication that we use in other countries. Okay, it's important to know the purpose of communication in globalization. Okay, as I've said, purpose. So you need to identify, why are you communicating on the first place? Why do you need to communicate globally on the first place? So what is your purpose in communicating globally? Is it because you want to learn other cultures? Is it because you want to know different issues regarding now different countries? Or it's just simply for learning? So you need to first identify the purpose before you start communicating globally. Because if you don't have a purpose, there's no point of communicating if you don't have any purpose now in communicating globally. Pag wala ka namang idea kung ano talaga ang gusto mong gawin globally, okay, mahihirapan ka ding mag-communicate to other people. So for example, you went to Korea, tapos you want, for example, to go to a certain place, tapos hindi mo alam kung paano mo siya i-communicate. Kasi hindi mo naman talaga alam yung purpose nung pagpunta mo doon or pag-communicate mo doon. So automatically, magkakaroon ka ng problema. So before you go now globally, you need to first identify your purpose. It's the same when you go on a trip. For example, may outing kayo ng mga kaibigan mo. Hindi ka naman pupuntang mag-outing nang wala kayong pupuntahan. So you need to identify the purpose. Saan kayo pupunta? Ilan kayong pupunta? Ano yung mga pupuntahan nyo? Sino yung mga pupuntahan nyo? Yun yung mga purpose natin. Okay? So pag wala tayong purpose, we will have a problem communicating globally. Okay? So I think that's the last part of our slide. So communication works for those who work at it. So as I've said, a communication is a two-way process. It's not a one-way process. Pag isa lang ang nagsasalita, yung isa hindi naman nakikinig, so wala tayong communication. And if for example, yung isa hindi naman ready, wala pa rin tayong communication. Okay? So do you have any question, Christine?